I have waited a long time to make this review. I wanted to use this camera properly in real world situations first, get a real feel for it before I do talk about it in detail. I didn't want this video to be a first reaction or just a specs rundown, and it's not going to be. So stick with me and I'll tell you why this camera has become my #1 camera for everything I do and why this is a camera you should know more about. Let's do this. Background, context. I have been shooting photos and video professionally for a long time. I've been reviewing cameras and lenses on this channel for about 6 years now. I could use any brand, any model, any system, and trust me, I have tried many of them. But in the end, I've chosen this camera, and I've chosen it for very specific reasons. I've been using Lumix cameras since the original S5. I still use the S5II, S5IIX and S9 occasionally, and they are all still very good cameras, but for me, there was always something missing from the overall package. I kept going back to Sony and Nikon from time to time, especially when shooting higher-end paid commercial work. Lumix cameras, until this came out, were great for personal projects and slower paced job situations where I had time to make sure everything was set up perfectly and worked okay. Then the S1R II came out, an incredible photography camera and the first Lumix camera that really showed what Panasonic is capable of. And then I've tried this. From the first 5 minutes with this camera in my hands, I knew something was different. I genuinely fell in love with it. What Panasonic actually did here. Lumix basically took everything people liked about the original S1 and the S5IIX, put it into one camera and then fixed or added pretty much everything people were asking for or complaining about. I really don't want this to sound like a commercial or like I've turned into some kind of Lumix fanboy, but it's generally difficult to say that this camera does anything badly. There are very few compromises here. Overheating, real talk. Now let's address the elephant in the room. When the camera first launched, there were reports of overheating. I live in the UK and historically I've never had major overheating problems with cameras, but I'll be honest, straight out the box during the summer I did have some overheating issues with the S1 this S1II. The camera did overheat and stop recording, but not for long. Changing the thermal management setting and setting the recording max temperature to high completely fixed the issue for me. I know this becomes more of a problem if you're shooting long takes in hot climates, direct sunlight or high bitrate formats. Recording to SD cards or external SSDs instead of CF Express helps, proper ventilation helps, and simply knowing the camera's limits goes a very long way. Even something as simple as cheap camera fan or a small handheld fan like this can cool the camera down in seconds if it still worries you. On top of that, the recent firmware update version 1.3 addresses this properly. Panasonic changed the thermal algorithm and the camera now operates in much higher temperatures than before. Let's be honest, cameras getting hot when recording high bitrate, high frame rate video is nothing new. A bit of common sense solves most of these overheating issues. Photography, why this sensor makes sense. This is a hybrid camera, and although most people focus on the video side, for me it's so much more than that. The 24.1 megapixel partially stacked CMOS sensor is ideal for photography. The S1R II is incredible when you need very high resolution, but high resolution sensors are more prone to noise, they are slower and they're not for everyone. The S1II, on the other hand, is capable of 70 frames per second blackout-free burst shooting with the electronic shutter. Rolling shutter is reduced and low light performance is excellent, even at very high ISO settings. Internal stabilization here is way above average. It doesn't just allow you to shoot slower shutter speeds handheld for photography, it also allows you to film handheld tripod-like shots very easily. And 24 million pixels is more than enough even for high-end commercial work. On top of that, you still get Lumix's 96 megapixel high-resolution mode, which combines 8 images and can be used handheld, no tripod needed. When you occasionally need a high-resolution file, it's there. Autofocus, no more excuses. Autofocus is something Lumix struggled with for a long time. They fixed it with the S5II, S5IIX and S9, then pushed it even further with S1R II and now again with this S1II. One thing Panasonic does better than most brands is firmware updates. They actively improve their cameras over time and recent updates have pushed autofocus performance even further. Subject recognition and tracking are excellent. In real world situations, I had no issues with autofocus here. Once you understand how it works, how to set it up properly for different subjects and situations, it is very reliable and easy to use. Video. This is where it gets serious. Obviously, I have to talk about the video side of things. The Nikon ZR got a lot of attention recently, but it's simply not as capable as this camera when it comes to video. Red RAW will not make you a better filmmaker. And honestly, there was no real excitement when the Nikon Z6 III came out. The ZR is essentially the same camera in a smaller viewfinder less body with a big screen. I generally think that S1II has far more to offer overall for filmmaking, and that includes compared to the recently released Canon R6 III and Sony a7 V. So let's talk specifics. 4K 60p no crop, 4K 120p small crop, open gate, of course it's here, and not just open gate, 5.1K 60p open gate. What really sets this camera apart is the sheer number of recording formats and options. QuickTime.mov for MP4, Apple ProRes, internal RAW, very high bitrate formats up to 4.2 gigabits per second, recording internally to SD, CF Express card, or externally to SSD drive via USB-C, all here. On the other end of the spectrum, you've got OpenGate MP4 Lite format, Lumix Lab app integration, and instant delivery workflows for Instagram or TikTok. Real-time LUTs are here, allowing you to bake your own looks straight into the footage for edit-less or grading-less workflows. Monitoring tools, histograms, vector scopes, false color, all built in. These are the tools that not that long ago you'd only find on cinema cameras or high-end external monitors. Log color and hybrid zoom. Vlog with 14 steps of dynamic range, check. Dynamic range boost, that gives you 15 steps of dynamic range, combining high and low ISO for cleaner shadows, check. You also get ARRI Log C3 as a paid upgrade. You need to buy an activation key to unlock it. I initially thought it wasn't really necessary unless you already shoot on ARRI cameras, but after trying it, it delivers a very different color response compared to Vlog. It costs around $250 extra, but for some filmmakers it will absolutely be worth it. And I absolutely love hybrid zoom for video. When enabled, it extends the range of your zoom lens without losing any quality. 4K stays 4K, but your 24 to 60mm lens effectively becomes 24 to 93mm at 24 frames per second. Speaking of lenses, Lumix's own 24 to 60mm was clearly designed with this camera in mind. It's a perfect everyday run and gun shooting combo. L-mount, build, and ergonomics. Lumix's native full-frame lens lineup isn't huge, but Sigma covers virtually every focal length imaginable in L-mount. Sigma lenses work just as well as Lumix lenses. You don't really miss out on anything. Well, you nearly don't miss out on anything. You don't get cropless stabilization when filming with non-Lumix lenses. More brands are joining the L-mount alliance as well. Samyang, Sirui, and hopefully soon Viltrox, so you are not limited at all when it comes to lens choices. The camera itself is built like a tank, solid, weather sealed, excellent ergonomics. It feels great in hand even with a large monitor and without a full cage or rig. The screen, the tilt and pan design everyone wanted is here, and it's far more usable than a standard flip out screen. Battery life is okay, better than S1R2, but not quite as good as the S5 IIX. USB-C power delivery and charging while in use are standard now and fully supported here. One thing that deserves special mention is the viewfinder. Coming from Sony cameras, this EVF is in completely different league. Bright, sharp, and generally enjoyable to use. Why this camera is still flying under the radar? Panasonic clearly wants a bigger share of the hybrid mid-range market, and in a category that's already crowded, they had to do something special. In my opinion, this is it. The biggest problem this camera has is that it's not Canon, Nikon or Sony. It's kind of hiding quietly in the shadows. People love talking about what's wrong with gear, but when a camera simply works, when it does almost everything well, it somehow becomes less interesting to talk about. This is a perfect example of that. Conclusion, I've used a lot of different cameras over the years. There are no truly bad cameras right now, but they're cameras that fit your workflow better than others. For me, as a professional photographer, filmmaker and YouTuber, the Lumix S1II fits my workflow extremely well. It's my #1 camera choice right now, and it's genuinely hard to imagine needing anything else anytime soon. If you get a chance to try one, do it. You might be surprised. And this is it from me. Thank you for watching. You know the drill. Like, comment, subscribe if you want to, and I'll see you in the next one.